Welcome to Echoing Tales. Tonight's story is titled Whispers of the River, a tale of love, betrayal, and the high cost of curiosity. A tale where love and doubt walk hand in hand, where shadows whisper secrets, and trust is a fragile thread easily broken. This is a story of Meera and Ronak, two souls bound by love but torn apart by suspicion. Join us as we journey into the depths of the human heart, to a place where reality blurs with the mystical. Meera and Ronak had once been deeply in love, meeting in college and quickly becoming inseparable. They laughed together, shared dreams, and built a life filled with love and mutual support. Ronak was charming and steady, while Meera was full of life and passion. Their marriage was a partnership that seemed unbreakable, with weekends spent cooking together, exploring new places, and long conversations about their future. But as Ronak's career took off, things changed. His jobs required long hours and frequent travel, leaving Meera alone more often than not. Although Ronak was focused on providing a comfortable life for them, Meera couldn't shake the feeling of being left behind, and the once vibrant connection between them began to fade. Meera's mind filled with doubts. Each time Ronak left for a business trip, she imagined him with another woman, growing increasingly suspicious. Despite Ronak's reassurances and genuine love, Meera's insecurity grew. She longed for the closeness they once had, but her fears created a distance neither of them could bridge. Ronak, unaware of the depth of Meera's worries, believed everything was fine, taking her support for granted. While Ronak remained loyal, Meera's inability to trust him turned her into a prisoner of her own doubts. One afternoon, feeling particularly lonely and desperate, Meera decided to visit the local fair. She wandered aimlessly, the laughter of children and the carnival music doing little to lift her spirits. As she walked, her eyes fell on a small, faded tent at the far end of the fair. A sign, barely legible, swayed in the breeze. Madame Aisha, clairvoyant, seer of futures. Drawn by an inexplicable urge, Meera stepped inside. Meera was desperate enough to try anything. The tent was dimly lit, filled with the smell of incense. Madame Aisha sat behind a small table, her eyes hidden behind a thin veil, yet they seemed to pierce through the darkness as Meera entered. You seek answers to questions that have no simple truth, Madame Aisha said softly, as if reading Meera's thoughts. Meera's heart pounded. She wasn't sure what she wanted to ask, but the words came tumbling out before she could stop them. Will my husband betray me? Madame Aisha regarded her with a look of infinite patience. Do not act on your whims, she said, her voice calm but firm. Trust is a fragile thread that binds two souls. But how can I trust when I don't know the truth? Meera demanded, her voice breaking. Tears stung her eyes. She was tired of the constant doubt, the sleepless nights, and the growing emptiness. On a sudden impulse, she said, Can you grant wishes? A flicker of surprise crossed Madame Aisha's face. Wishes are powerful things. They can twist fate in ways you cannot imagine. Meera's desperation bubbled over. I wish I could teleport anywhere I want, just to see what's really happening. Madame Aisha's expression turned grave. Think carefully before asking for such power. The ability to be everywhere may leave you feeling like you're nowhere at all. Meera almost rolled her eyes as the clairvoyant spoke of the dangers of making wishes, convinced the woman was just trying to sound mysterious. "How much is this going to cost me?" Mira asked bluntly, folding her arms across her chest. She was prepared to hear a price, maybe something outrageous, a ridiculous fee for a few comforting words. Madame Aisha didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied Mira with eyes that seemed to see right through her. "The price is not paid in money," Madame Aisha finally said, her voice a low whisper. "What you seek will come at a cost far greater than you can imagine. Be careful what you wish for once the door is opened, it cannot be closed." Ignoring the unease prickling at her skin, Mira insisted on making her wish, convinced that it was just a silly game. What harm could possibly come from it? "I just want to know the truth," she insisted. "Grant me this wish." Madame Aisha sighed, a look of sorrow in her eyes. "Very well. You shall have the power to teleport to any place you can think of by drawing an element of that place and visualizing it in your mind." She hurried home, her mind racing with possibilities, yet doubt still lingered at the edges of her thoughts. What if Madame Aisha had been nothing more than a skilled actress? Mira's logical mind scoffed at the idea of teleportation, dismissing it as a fantasy born from desperation. But curiosity had always been her driving force, and now it urged her to test the clairvoyant's strange promise. In the safety of her bedroom, Mira pulled out a sketch pad and pencil, her hands trembling with a mix of excitement and disbelief. She sat at her desk, trying to steady herself. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. But despite her doubts, her hand moved, sketching the rose bush in her garden, the one she had planted last spring. She stared at the drawing, trying to silence the voice that told her this was nonsense. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes and imagined her garden, the scent of roses, the breeze on her skin. A tingling sensation began at her fingertips, spreading through her body. Suddenly, the familiar scent of earth and flowers filled her nose, and sunlight warmed her face. Mira's eyes flew open. She was no longer in her bedroom, but standing in a garden surrounded by her roses. The transition had been instant. She touched a petal, feeling its velvety softness. It was all real. She was truly there. Her heart pounded with excitement, eager to test it again. Mira walked back to her bedroom and sat down at her desk. If the garden worked, what else could she do? She quickly sketched her living room, capturing the bay window, the sofa, and the painting above the mantel. Her hand was steady now, her heart racing with anticipation. Closing her eyes, she focused on the living room, imagining every detail. The tingling sensation returned, more powerful this time. In an instant, she felt the softness of the rug beneath her feet. Mira opened her eyes and found herself standing in the living room, just as she had drawn it. Afternoon light filtered through the bay window, and the familiar scent of her favorite candle filled the air. Everything was exactly as it should be. "Oh my God," she whispered, grinning. She touched the sofa, feeling the texture of the fabric, solid and real. The power was real. Excitement bubbled inside her. Mira's mind whirled with possibilities. Now she could discover the truth about Ronak, follow him, see if her suspicions were right. A week later, Ronak announced he had a business trip that would keep him away for 3 days. As Mira watched him pack, her heart pounded with suspicion. After he left, she paced the house, her mind filled with dark thoughts. This was it, the proof she needed. He was going to meet another woman, perhaps at the farmhouse they owned, a secluded property deep in the woods. Mira's suspicions had been growing for months, fueled by snippets of conversation she had overheard over the past few months. Ronak had mentioned the farmhouse often in his phone calls, his voice softening whenever he spoke of it. He would tell his colleagues about the tranquility of the place, how it was a sanctuary, a retreat where he could clear his mind and escape the pressures of work. Mira had listened to these conversations from the next room, her heart sinking each time she heard the affection in his voice when he talked about the farmhouse. She couldn't shake the image of him at the farmhouse with another woman, sharing the peaceful heaven that was supposed to be theirs. Mira convinced herself that Ronak had been hiding something, and that his love for the farmhouse wasn't just about solitude. It was this belief that led her to her plan. She had the power to find out the truth once and for all, the power to teleport anywhere she wanted. If Ronak was going to the farmhouse, she could be there too, unseen, lurking in the shadows. She would finally know what he was up to. Without hesitating, Mira grabbed her sketchpad and drew the narrow, winding staircase leading to the basement of the farmhouse. She knew every detail by heart. Closing her eyes, she concentrated on the image. In the blink of an eye, Mira felt the cool, damp air of the basement on her skin, the musty scent filling her nostrils. She opened her eyes and saw the narrow, dimly lit space exactly as she remembered it. She had done it. She was in the farmhouse. A sense of triumph washed over her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she crept up the wooden stairs, each step creaking beneath her weight. As she reached the seventh step, Mira felt a flicker of anxiety, but quickly pushed it aside. She placed her foot on the eighth step, and suddenly the wood crumbled beneath her with a loud groan. The memory came rushing back in that instant. Ronak had once mentioned that the eighth stair was loose, and he'd meant to repair it, but never got around to it. The realization came too late. Mira's ankle twisted as a step gave way, throwing her off balance. Mira's arms flailed, grasping for the banister, but it was out of reach. She wobbled on the edge for a second before falling backward. Her head collided with the wooden railing as she tumbled down the stairs. Pain shot through her like lightning, and she felt the bones in her wrist snap as she landed hard on the concrete below. Her vision blurred, stars dancing before her eyes. A final searing pain flared in her head, then darkness swallowed her whole. Mira woke to agony. Her head throbbed, a relentless pounding that made her stomach churn. Her wrists were on fire, the pain so intense she could barely think. She tried to move, but every twitch sent fresh waves of pain through her body. Slowly, she became aware of her surroundings. The cold, damp basement floor, the dim light from the bare bulb above, the smell of mildew. Panic set in as she realized she couldn't draw. Her fingers were bent at odd angles, swollen and bruised. She screamed for help, her voice echoing off the walls, but there was no answer. The farmhouse was miles from anywhere, isolated in the woods. Ronak was away, but no one knew she was here. She was utterly alone. Days passed in a blur of pain and darkness. Hunger gnawed at her, but it was a thirst that tormented her most. Her mouth was dry, her lips cracked, her throat felt like sandpaper. She tried to crawl towards the stairs, but her body was weak, her movements sluggish. She lay there, drifting in and out of consciousness, her mind slipping away. Her thoughts became fixated on water. She remembered the river from her childhood, the one near her parents' house. She remembered hot summer days spent wading in the cool water, the sound of it rushing over the rocks. The memory was so vivid, she could almost feel the water on her skin, hear the gentle lapping at the river bank. Using what little strength she had left, Meera dragged herself across the floor. Her fingers scraped against the rough concrete, each movement sending fresh waves of pain through her hands. She found a shard of glass on the floor, glinting in the dim light. Grasping it between her broken fingers, she used it to scratch a crude drawing of the river bank into the dirt. Her hand trembled with each line, but she forced herself to continue, driven by the desperate need for water. She closed her eyes, focusing all her thoughts on the river. She imagined the feel of the water, the sound of it, the relief it would bring. A familiar sensation washed over her, the air around her seeming to hum. And then, suddenly, the cool rush of water enveloped her. Meera gasped, her mouth filling with icy water as she found herself submerged in the river. Her body, weak and battered, couldn't fight the current. She tried to scream, but water poured into her lungs. Her hands, broken and useless, couldn't swim. Instinctively, she gulped down the water, the cold liquid soothing her parched throat for a fleeting moment. Her body went limp, the darkness swallowing her as the river carried her away. Weeks later, Ronak stood by the river bank, staring at the spot where they had found Meera's body. The authorities said it was an accident, that she must have fallen in. Ronak's heart ached with a pain that words couldn't capture. He had loved Meera more than anything, despite her insecurities, despite the distance that had grown between them. He had always hoped they would find their way back to each other. In fact, he had been planning a surprise for her, a way to rekindle their love. He had been speaking so much about the farmhouse recently because he was secretly planning on renovating it. He wanted to make it perfect for their anniversary, imagining the look on Meera's face when he brought her there, the place transformed, ready to host a celebration of their years together. Now, the farmhouse felt like a hollow shell, echoing with memories of the dreams they would never fulfill. He couldn't shake the feeling that Meera was still there, her presence lingering in the air. He thought he heard her voice sometimes, in the rustling of the leaves or the murmur of the river. It was a voice filled with accusation and sorrow, echoing with the truth she had sought so desperately. Trust, Madam Aisha had warned, was a fragile thread. In seeking to unravel it, Meera had become ensnared in her own web of doubt and fear, lost forever in the currents of what she couldn't control. And somewhere, deep in the woods, the sound of water carried a whisper of regret as the river flowed on, silent and eternal. This is an original work of fiction created by this channel Echoing Tales, blending suspense and mystery. Join us as we unravel a story shrouded in mystery and eerie echoes every week. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Like the video and be sure to hit the bell icon for more echoing tales. So, until we meet again in the next story, stay vigilant. And before you sleep tonight, don't forget to take one last look into the darkness.